All right, today we're going to be going through how to check in an appointment, okay? So for example, Tuesday this is our scheduler. It's the beginning of the day and we've got nobody so far that's checked in. We've got one cancellation for this afternoon. No appointments open for the day. Let's say Miss Shields showed up at 8:03 in the morning. We do have a 15-minute grace period for our clients to show up for their appointment, and we will still check them in. If a client is past that 15-minute grace period, then we do have to confirm with the doctor to ensure that we can still take that patient for the day. Okay, so Miss Shields comes in at 8:03 with Jemba, and she's here for back problems. What we're going to do is we're going to hover over the appointment, right click, we're going to go up to appointment status type, and off to the side is a toolbar. You can see red is for canceled, green is for checked in, pink is for no-show, and yellow is for not checked in. Okay, we're not going to use any of the other colors at this point. Those are the only ones that we're going to focus on. So for this one, we're going to check this patient in. So we clicked on the green. Always, always, always make sure you're reading all your pop-ups as you're going through each account. Don't just automatically exit out. This is going to give you very helpful information, whether or not that client needs to have an hour booked, whether or not it needs sedation prior, or any pop-up notes that you may need to tell that client before we book an appointment. There's nothing here significant for me to know, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. And you can see here, Miss Shields has now been checked in. Now the team in the back looks at the scheduler and knows that Jemba has arrived for the appointment for Dr. Walsh. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change that back so that way it doesn't get messed up in the system. We're going to also take a look at our bath schedule. So the same process happens for baths, surgeries, borders, anything that we're checking into the system that is not considered an outpatient does have to be turned green on the computer, okay? So for example, let's say this pet is here for a bath, Bruno. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, they can still drop off. We take drop-offs for baths from when we open up until 10 a.m. in the morning. So Bruno has arrived before the scheduled time, the scheduled cutoff for a bath. So same thing, you're going to right click, scroll down to appointment status, and checked in. Okay? And let's say that we're here for a surgery and it's going to be Levi that comes in. We are going to right click appointment status and turn it green. What do we do in a situation that a client is late for their appointment? So let's say let's go back to the example of Jemba Shields. Let's say it was 8:17 and the client has arrived for the appointment, okay? You have, at that point, notified the doctor. The doctor told you, unfortunately, the client has to reschedule. What we're going to do here is we will change that status to canceled. Or, for instance, if the client does not show up in the lobby or to check in for their appointment, we would change that to a no-show appointment. We do want to change the appointments to reflect what actually happened, to ensure that moving forward, if we've got the same pattern in behavior from a client, we know that we can have a conversation. We don't want a client to constantly not show up for their appointments, and so we do want to document this the correct way, okay? I'm going to show you how to check in a boarding reservation now. So for example, when you check in a boarder, the first thing that the client is going to do is walk up to you at the front desk and tell you that they're there for a boarding reservation. A lot of times I can automatically know who's there for a boarder based off of what they have in their hands. Typically they've got a bag, they've got a bed, they've got some other stuff in their hands, which signifies most of the time that they're coming in for boarding, okay? So for this example, we're going to pull up the account. So the client came in and told me their phone number. I don't know their phone number off the top of the head, so I'm going to off the top of my head, so I'm going to just use an account number. Okay. So Miss Robertson arrives. You can ask her, yes, ma'am, what is your last name? And type in her last name. Okay, and you can scroll down and search through here for the correct name. In this case, we're looking for Elizabeth Robertson. Okay, we're on this client's account. You can also ask her for her phone number. All right, double click. They're going to be on that client account. Okay. Now, here's all of her regular information. We need to be selected onto the patient. So Julius is the patient that we're checking in for boarding. Okay. There is no drop down for boarding here. The only way to get them checked in for boarding is to go through their boarding reservations, okay? One of the things that you do want to look at before you check this boarder in is you're going to be looking at your boarding check-in sheets. This is going to be in your chart, so grab the chart that's going to be prepared a couple days before, open it up and take a look at this boarding check-in sheet. This stuff you will go over with the client. You want to make sure that the arrival date is correct, the departure date is correct. You want to put in the time that they've arrived and what time they think they're going to leave. Please remind the client that we do have a policy that states that if they pick up before 2 o'clock on the day that they arrive, on the day that they are going home, they actually are not charged for that day. Make sure we're capturing an emergency contact name and phone number here. Verify that we are in fact staying in a standard suite. So if we look in this boarding module here, our Annex 13 and R4 is where Julius is staying throughout his stay. We don't ever want to move a pet more than 2 times, and you can see in R13 and R4, he's maxed out on how many times that we can move this pet. So yes, that is a standard suite. You can see he stayed in standard and an executive stay once, but for the most part, he has stayed in standard. And then if we are looking in here, we can also see that they're wanting 2 additional playtimes. With standard suites, it does not include any additional playtimes. Okay, so this means that the dog will get 4 walks and 2 additional playtimes per day. For VIP stays, it is 4 walks and 2 playtimes included. And then it tiers down to executive where it is 4 walks, 1 playtime. Standard does not include any playtimes, okay? Bath, it does say here that there is no bath before pickup. You're gonna confirm this stuff with the client as you are checking them in. The first doctor, it looks as it's listed here as any, so we don't have a preference on which doctor sees this pet. We do want to make sure that we've got a doctor listed, so in case anything happens while they're boarding with us, that we've got a preferred doctor. So the CSR checking in this client needs to make sure we're capturing which doctor, if they have a preference. The next box is going to be feeding instructions, what the client is requesting for us to feed. It is very, very important that we are checking this as we're checking the client in to make sure that what we are feeding them during their boarding stay is actually correct as well. Okay, here it says no treatments. If you look up at the top right up here, this is going to tell us the reminders that are currently due. What is required for boarding is influenza, bordetella, rabies, and a distemper parvo. The other stuff, so see this green hand thumb mark, that is signifying that that is current. The stop sign means that it is not current. We do not require any of this stuff. So a fecal exam, an examination, heartworm test, and lepto is not required for boarding. These are the vaccines: influenza, bordetella, rabies. So we do have to make sure that we've got those 4 vaccines. These 2 are combined into 1 injection. So 1, 2, 3, 4 vaccines is required before we can let them come back for boarding. Okay. So for example, here this says no treatment. That is correct because the stuff that we are requiring for the boarding is all current. You can always ask the client. I do see that we are due for our heartworm test, our lepto, and our fecal exam. And I am noticing that that stuff is already not current. Would you like us to get that done when you're checking in? It's always a good rule of thumb to double check and verify. The client in our phone call said that we did not have any pre-existing medical conditions here. So you're going to just verify that with the client, and no medications. We don't know whether or not we're coming in with any toys and treats, but as we talked about, most of the time they do come in with toys and treats. So if you are noticing that they are dropping off that stuff, make sure you're identifying that on the boarding check-in sheet, what exactly it is that they're leaving. We want to make sure that the client is understanding that in our boarding policy, if they leave anything behind, that they know that is a strong possibility that it may get misplaced while it's here. We do not recommend them leaving any toys and treats here. Because we want to make sure that we are utilizing the stuff that we have here, okay? And the next box here is if the owner is declining a nail trim and anal gland expression. The verbiage here is a little bit confusing, but this is if they're not wanting that done. It is a complimentary service, so we actually don't charge them for it when they come in for boarding. So it's roughly about a $40 value for them to get that done. And so here the client doesn't decline it, meaning that they're wanting it. So the next box is you are going to initial right here that you checked in the client. So that way if there's a mistake, there is a way that we can track who checked that client in, so that way we can address it with that person. And then the owner does also need to sign this boarding policy as well, boarding check-in sheet. Please look at the left-hand side of the chart and make sure you have an updated boarding policy as well. If you don't have an updated boarding policy, please grab one and highlight the little boxes and make sure the client signs that. Go over the boarding policy with them as well. This is just stating that they understand that we're not responsible for any of their belongings while they're here with us, that we do require certain vaccinations. If something happens to their pet, we are a full service veterinary hospital and we do require that they get seen if something presents. That's part of us being in an animal hospital. And so that is it. Okay, so the ACT team does all of this part down here to check in the patient. This one does not have a bath, so we're not going to look at the bath schedule, but if you do see a bath selected here, we have to check them in several different spots. Okay, so this example, we are only going to be checking them in the boarding module, which is going to be right there in this little calendar. You're going to turn that patient green, signifying that it's checked, yellow, signifying that it's checked in. The colors here are a little confusing. If you hover over, it'll actually tell you, or you can click it and change the color easy as well. Okay, we're going to change it back to reserved because I'm not actually checking in this client. Okay, that's an example. Now, let's say your boarding policy, your boarding check-in sheet says yes to a bath and yes to treatment. What do we do in that situation? We have to check them in our boarding reservations, and then we also have to check them in easy time. We should have a drop-off scheduled that day for the pet. We don't have one scheduled here just because obviously that pet's not due for any services. The reason we schedule them for a drop-off is because within 24 hours of that pet being seen, we are actually administering vaccinations. It is the CSR responsibility to make sure that the appointment is attached to the scheduler, remembering that the team in the back follows this schedule for everything that they do. So therefore, if you are doing any kind of treatments, or let's say the client comes to you and says, oh, by the way, I told him, no, I didn't want to have any exams done, but unfortunately now she's got an ear infection, he or she has an ear infection, you would also ensure that you are putting them on the schedule and within 24 hours and checking them in by right-clicking and turning them green, okay? So they need to have a scheduled drop-off appointment within 24 hours if they need a doctor to do a physical exam. And the last part, if they are having a bath done, okay, the bath is going to be scheduled for the day that they pick up. So let's go back to Julius's appointment boarding check-in sheet. You can see here the 11th through the 16th. So if a bath was selected, we should have a bath on the 16th for the day of our discharge. We're not going to have a bath, obviously, because we're not bathing this pet. But for this example, we're going to go ahead and walk through how to do that. Let's say the client changed their mind and wanted to add a bath. You would just come down here to the bottom, say add an appointment, block it off for 30 minutes, and it's going to be a bath, okay? Okay, save and close, and then it would put that on the scheduler. Okay, then to check it in, you would just right click, say checked in, and that would signify the ACT team on when they need to have a bath done. Okay, remember you are controlling the flow for the rest of the team. So if you put this bath on the wrong date, the pet will get a bath on the wrong date. So it is very, very important that the person that is checking this stuff, checking the client in and preparing the paperwork, is double checking every one of these spots to make sure all of this is done the correct way. And that is it.